welcome to another episode of the Oxford Brookes Biomedical Podcast series. Joining us today, we have Julie Wood, a commercial leader at the Thermo Fisher Scientific. She is an Oxford Brookes alumnus and completed a bachelor's degree in human biology before becoming a research scientist at the University of Oxford for 9 years. There, Julie spent 5 years in breast and colon cancer research before moving to neurogenetics, investigating the cellular pathways in Minks disease and the involvement of the FOXP2 gene in verbal dyspraxia and movement disorders. In 2013, she joined Thermo Fisher Scientific as a biosciences sales representative in the UK and is currently EMEA commercial leader for cell biology and cell therapy. Thank you so much for joining us, Julie. How are you?
I'm really well, Luca. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. So we'll dive right into the questions. Can you tell us some of your fondest memories or experiences you've had during your time in research, in particular at Oxford University?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things that I remarked upon when I first started working in the lab, so I really enjoyed practical lab work during my degree course, and basically you just got to do that all day. So it was great fun. Lots of variety. So you get a taster when you're in doing your practical sessions at uni, and you have an idea. And I used to really enjoy them, and the prep beforehand, and then doing the actual practical and then the write-up, and that's essentially what it is every day. And yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved being in the lab.
Which in particular at Oxford Uni, was it more the neurogenetics side of research, or were you also quite interested in the oncology side, which you were also doing at the start?
The oncology was where I wanted to be. I think I undertook my degree course because I was really interested in science at school. When you're thinking about long-term career, we're never going to know everything there is to know about science. So you think, okay, so that's future-proofing myself to a certain degree. And I then, cancer, if you can contribute in a way to leaving the world in a better place than when you entered it, and it really inspired me to work in the cancer research field. And I was in breast and colon cancer was where we were doing the research. I really enjoyed that. And then as you get into the work, it becomes more about that sort of career and that progression. And I had the opportunity to move into neurogenetics and work with the professor who discovered muscular dystrophy. So then it was joining a lab of 26 scientists, and it was a high performing lab. And that was a great experience. I think, between the research and actually the fun side of who you were working with, I really enjoyed being in a big group. And we were all similar ages. We were quite social. It was a little bit like an extension of uni.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And gosh, and then working in such an environment with such a high caliber, I guess, professor, or what you were saying with the muscular dystrophy must have been quite like do you never sometimes feel a bit, not starstruck isn't the word, a little bit gobsmacked sometimes, thinking like, oh wow, I'm really working in such a amazing group and able to participate in it?
It was terrifying.
It was terrifying.
So I was at the Wellcome Trust Centre for Human Genetics, and we regularly do presenting our lab work. And Adrian Hill is in the news at the moment, Sir Adrian Hill, and you find yourself presenting to those people.
Amazing.
With Sarah Gilbert in the audience, and with Adrian in the audience, and you are surrounded by incredible minds, and there's so much to learn. Really good opportunity.
Fantastic. And so you initially started in academia and in research, and you had this transition going into the commercial and technical sales. Can you tell us a little bit more about that transition, what it was like, especially going into, I know you didn't immediately go into Thermo Fisher Scientific, but what that transition was like, the differences you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. So at that point in time, we were 2006, 2007, and I could see that there was a change in funding, and a change. It was becoming increasingly hard to get funding. So I just knew at that time point I didn't want to become a group leader. I really loved being at the bench. I think the experience I saw was that consistently people who really love their science and they moved into being group leaders, it changes, as it does in any role. As you develop and you gain experience and you take that next step in your career, it changes. And for me, I wanted to do something different, and I felt whilst I loved being in the lab, there was something more that I was just missing. So I started asking, some of the people that I have connections with that came in to visit the center, and I looked at sales. So I spoke to quite a few of the reps. I was lab manager at that point, just to try and understand, well, what does it involve? What's the day-to-day look like? What are the challenges that you face? And I was lucky enough to have an opportunity with a relatively small company that wanted to get started in Europe, because I think the biggest challenge as an academic with no commercial experience, how do you show your value?
Yeah.
And quite often you have to take that small step, to work with a smaller company to give you that little bit of experience to then move on to somebody, to a company with the caliber of Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is what I did. And yeah, I think probably one of the best choices I made.
Well, here we are today. And
exactly.
it must have been quite daunting, from being so long in academia, almost being a whole decade including also university, it was seeming that to be kind of your field. And then all of a sudden within within 6 years, 3 years before you would leave, you started to look elsewhere. And, was sales the first kind of field you were looking beyond academia, or did you have come across any other
So there are different aspects. So I looked at the clinical trials side, moving into that part of it, or the early phases. So it's quite an easy step from the research environment to train up to move into clinical. And I saw a few of my colleagues were doing the same. So we were all aware that funding was becoming increasingly challenging. So we were starting to look at alternative career options. And I have friends who have moved out into the clinical trial side of things. There are things like field application support, where you're a specialist, a scientist supporting other scientists, trying to improve what they do in terms of methodologies or using new pieces of equipment. So I did look at some other options, but sales kind of fit my personality.
It appeared to be. Fantastic.
Exactly.
So once then you were finally immersed, like even within, whether it was in Thermo Fisher Scientific or in that startup company, well, it was trying to start in Europe. What was the immediate reaction or the immediate characteristics, or you realized once you're entering into sales, like, oh, wow, okay, I'm now into this new kind of job? And not that you wished you had seen this, you had known this earlier, but it's just like, oh, okay, this is now even increasing my passion and my interest in this new career you're pursuing.
Yeah, so it was a definite change in pace, going from academia. So it's a completely different focus in terms of results, that expectation, and essentially learning a different language. So I'd grown up as a scientist, on my studies as a scientist, and that the business element hadn't necessarily been there. So it was, I've gone through effectively an MBA. In that education process of understanding the commercial aspects and the importance of that, and still bringing the science to it. So we're still able to take the science to the customer, but I have a different set of performance measures, and it's about the sales side of it, whereas before it was about the results of the science. But it's you're still bringing results at the end of the day, just to it's a different emphasis.
Was it quite tricky to learn that new language, or did you have the available? Yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine. Or were there available resources, or in a sense, like were you taken under the wing of someone to kind of be taught the ropes, or was it kind of a lot of your
exactly.
trial and error?
Yeah, so what we try and do is 70% is on the job learning. So we're kind of learning as we're working, and then we try and ensure that everybody has 10% of their time in any given calendar year is spent within the classroom. And then the other time we have what we call Thermo Fisher University, which is an online training system, and it gives you access to so many different modules, related to your job, and then other things, like getting the skills in sort of Microsoft 365, lots of different, medical devices training and things like that. So we have a really good training program, which is super important, and everybody's supported on their career all the way through. And we are such, it's such a big company that there's a beauty of working in a large organization. You can change careers within the same company, you can do slightly different things, you can live in different countries. We've got this so much capability to really move around and explore different things, and it is never boring at all.
That's
So
all.
I've probably changed roles every 2 to 3 years.
Oh wow! So actually
you know
quite frequently.
yeah, absolutely. And then if that's, if we're not changing roles, then there are, slight we're launching products all the time. I'm part of the business unit that I'm part of is cell biology and cell and gene therapy. And, our goal is to bring products to market that support our customers, in a really beneficial way. And I don't know if you've, had any experience of being in the cell biology lab. Cell culture media bottles, quite often they used to be just square. And actually, when you work in a cell culture hood, they're really hard to handle and hard to manage. So we spent a program when we were observing how people work in a cell culture hood. How can we make that better for them? So we launched what we called the boxy bottle, which is a
Box
cell
bottle.
culture
Okay.
media bottle with a slight angle on the lid, which
Oh,
when you're
I understand.
putting your
Yeah.
pipette in, you don't have to do such a big angle to put your pipette into the media bottle. They're also easier pour from. They're stackable. So it's little changes like that we've made that make a really big difference to your day-to-day job. It's not just about necessarily the whizzy products, the amazing
No.
products, but it's what can we do on that basis. So it's always so exciting because we've constantly launching new products or innovating products that we already have, and just those slight changes.
Amazing.
One of the other things that I really loved about the switching roles was that ability to travel. I have a team, team of 23 people, and they're spread out across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So it's lots of travel, and it was prior to pandemic times.
Prior, yeah.
But that ability to see the world a little bit and get paid for it, which is
I
a
think
bonus.
it's a lifelong dream for a lot of people, and then being able to work, communicating with people, selling these products, still in the scientific world, very much so, and then having the opportunity to travel. It sounds like it's an all-inclusive package, really. But I mean, obviously, it's not. It
Absolutely.
doesn't come easy, but it's definitely, I think you could say, enjoyable, to say the
Yeah, the
least.
4 a.m. starts are not always so pleasant when you're going to the airport, or the times when
No,
your flight gets cancelled and you can't get home again. But you
but
get to see,
yeah.
the amazing work people are doing that you
Mm,
don't, within academia, you're working on your project in your field, and that's fantastic. Being in a commercial environment, I get to see lots of those. I get to see and hear some of the fantastic things that people are doing, and that excites me as a scientist.
mm,
It's fascinating. It's
mm.
fascinating that the gene editing technologies, what people are using, and how they're utilizing it. Really, really is exciting.
Do you think there's also, just on the side note, a lot of commercial difference, even though the scientific world nowadays, with globalization and with technology today, is we like to think that almost everything is up to the par within different countries or different areas. But do you think there's still a very big commercial gap between, let's say, certain areas in the world? By you traveling around the world, you've been able to see different commercial requirements?
There is
Still
in
is.
terms of that investment.
Mm,
Yes, there is, and there are. even within what we would class as, as Western Europe, there are differences in funding. And there are differences, where, there's a bit in Germany and the UK, for example, there's a lot of investment there, and, lots of biotechs. Whereas, you think of, some of the emerging markets, there's not quite the investment.
The
We tend to see quite, exactly, because it's not where the large pharmaceutical companies have built their hubs. But that's not to say there isn't important work going on. But it just, it's where the funding is and where the main research institutes are.
And I think that's a reality that I think us students are starting to realize a lot more now, emerging from university. I think we're still very much in a little bubble at university a little bit. I don't know if you had that experience when you came out of Brooks and then going into, not let alone academia and research, but especially on a global level, like what you're doing now. There's definitely, I think, they do say money makes the world go round, but
and I think coming out of university, I didn't necessarily really appreciate how far I could spread my wings. I think lots of people wanted to go off and do their work in the States, and people were considering doing work within mainland. But actually to go further, to go to Singapore, or there's the ability to go anywhere and definitely do it while you don't have the commitments of of the family and the children, where it makes it a little bit more, you can still do it, but it's just a bit more challenging. But
it's challenging, I can imagine.
Travel, go see the world, work anywhere.
And if someone is interested now in using the biomedical knowledge to potentially pursue a similar career, like either in academia, but I think particularly today we want to talk about your career in sales, what are some of the most important characteristics that are of higher regard and value for becoming tailored to such an environment such as sales?
I would say one of the key factors within the commercial world is that ability to develop relationships with anybody, and that communication aspect. It is something that you learn and you build on, but having that confidence, having resilience and patience. You get a lot of no's when you're first starting out in sales. You get a lot of no's. You get used to it. It's fine. And the patience, research takes time. We know it takes time. Therefore, sometimes the sales cycle, as we call it, from someone saying, I'm thinking about buying that product too, I will buy that product, can be 6 months. It can take a long time. The other thing is that out of the box thinking, because we all suffer from it. We get emails every day from companies. How do you make yourself stand out above above everybody else? How do you become that salesperson that a customer will come to? They reach out to instantly. If they come and say, right, Jules will know, she'll know who I can do, and I need this product for my work. Jules will know who to get or who to contact. So it's relationships. People buy from people that they like, ultimately. But if that's not your thing, that doesn't mean to say that there isn't an opportunity to be in the commercial space. We have R&D. We invest a huge amount of money into R&D. So we have labs in the States, we have labs in Singapore, we have, there are R&D labs all over the world with the company. There's field application specialists. You don't have to be sales driven to get out and on the road and support customers. So we have a team, my team, that help customers with their methodologies. They help customers establish new protocols. They're helping with training, either at the customer site, or we provide training at our customer training center. There's lots and lots of roles that you can do. It doesn't just have to be sales. And
one path driven. And I think what was amazing as well, just thinking about as well, and from our previous conversation as well, was the ability not only to be able to build relationships with customers, but the variety of customers, because obviously
Yeah.
you're not going to have the same type of customer every single time. And you, like you were saying, the adaptability, that's a very crucial thing as well.
Yeah.
But I think that's also skills where I think sometimes you have to, sometimes like you mentioned, get no as an answer and then learn from where to eventually get that to become a yes. And then,
Exactly, and it's a wonderful art form to be able to do it.
an art, yeah. Mm,
Exactly of that engaging with somebody to the point where you really understand it. Sometimes no is okay, no is okay.
mm,
And actually, if we're talking to a customer and we're talking about a particular product, and you uncover that actually it's not going to be suitable, we don't try and sell it.
mm.
In fact, if you're a good salesperson, you have an understanding of other products within that area as well, that you can then say to the customer, well, actually, I think this
This
product
is
would
better
suit you
this is
better.
better suited. Mm.
We don't sell it, but
Oh,
but
so not
that's what
even
you
if,
do.
oh, wow. Okay.
No, because that's really, but what's important is the service you provide at the end of the day.
Mm.
If we don't have the right fit, but we know someone else does, and that kind of it happens. um it happens quite often. We get
Mm.
contacted from with other reps who will say, look, we've got this customer, and we can't actually meet their needs, but we think you might be able to.
Well, that's nice
It's
actually, because
important.
I thought it was a very, very, I mean, it is competition, very competitive, but almost, but in a way, it's also helping each other. Not,
It's
not helping each other. I think that's maybe pushing it, but to a certain extent, yeah,
it's helping the customer. It's
helping the
doing the
customer.
it's doing the
Exactly.
best. It's doing the best thing for the customer.
Not for the other, not for the other
No,
company
no,
at
but it's
all.
a small, it's
It's
a
a
small
sport.
world. It's a
Yeah.
small world, and you
Mm.
never know when you move to a different company and you get bought up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So
So
need to keep it
yeah,
always be very diplomatic.
absolutely.
So linking back to this, if now we've discussed the ability to have language, the adaptability to with customers and to build relationships. If there is a single piece of advice you would give to newly graduated students within the biomedical sector, which are, I mean, we can say it as a kind of a two-part answer, who are either interested in pursuing academia, what kind of single piece of advice you would give to them going into academia, what to maybe expect or what to maybe develop already at their time at university, to then what you would suggest to a student maybe going towards commercial. I think again, like that skill of learning to build adaptability and relations, what's kind of a practical piece of advice you would give for that? So kind of two
The
answers.
really, it's a great question. I think the really important thing is to be proactive
Mm,
and do your groundwork. And even before you graduate, really, really make sure that you um, fully understand what the career path that you're considering
mm,
involves. Um, who you work with and for makes a big, big difference
big
to the
difference.
enjoyment of
Mm,
what you do every day. And that's super important. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're necessarily learning that as a life lesson, that you end up working either in an academic research group, or
mm,
you're working in a company that you don't enjoy. I mean, I joined Thermo Fisher Scientific when it was in Vitrogen, because I use the products in the lab. And I knew
mm,
at that point I could sell something I really believed in and trusted. I'd use the products, they'd really help my research work. So I didn't have a problem selling them. So I think
mm,
you really have to believe. And the same goes for academia. You have to be passionate about it,
mm,
particularly if you're considering going on to postgraduate and doing a PhD or doing a master's. You're going to live and breathe that.
mm.
It's very different from a modular based undergrad degree course. You are going to live and breathe.
Yeah.
You really need to know that the supervisor you're going to be working with is definitely somebody you want to work with, and reach out beforehand.
Mm,
Reach out well in advance and say, look, I'm interested in joining your research group, or joining the company. Thermo Fisher has its own talent acquisition team, We run graduate programs.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of things that can be done. We have a great careers page, and the same of any university. And do your due diligence for
Mm.
your future.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly for us, where we have, we've done a specific degree course. We come out with a qualification. Um, it's really important to make sure that we use that.
At its maximum potential. Yeah, of course.
Absolutely, you've invested the time doing it, then
You have to be
utilize
able
it.
to,
and
yeah, to use it.
and it doesn't have to be in doing the day-to-day science. It can be in a role, like mine, a commercial role. We've seen increasingly, over the last 5-6 years, that you can do MBAs specifically tailored to life sciences. I come across procurement people all the time within the science industry that aren't from science. They have no understanding. So, it makes it very challenging to be for them, because they don't
Yeah.
understand the nuances between cell culture media.
Exactly. And
You know,
like
it,
you,
it,
yeah, like what you
yeah,
said earlier, you actually had not only hands-on, but you understood even the usage, like the practicality of those. I mean, in this case, those instruments, those products, like the cell culture medium, and like all the machinery. I think that's even going more advanced. But if you have the understanding, and you've even furthermore even tried it out yourself, then when selling obviously a product, the more you believe in it, the better, like you were saying. And obviously not having the background is tricky.
yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. But it opens up a whole field, and it doesn't necessarily mean it has to
Mm.
be science, but it can be science
No.
related, that you're
Yeah.
still utilizing it to some degree.
Mm. And I think that's the other good thing about sales, is that there's always a need for sales. I think nowadays there's also a bit of a fear about certain careers or certain specialities, which are starting to now almost filter out almost now with technology evolving, maybe. But I think I think what you would say as well, being in the field, that there's always a high demand for it, for.
Absolutely. So the commercial aspect, people always need to buy it. How they buy it is changing, and
Mm,
what we were doing 10 years ago as sales reps has changed.
change.
We use the digital tools
Mm,
more than ever. Our analytics are smarter as well. But either the commercial side or R&D.
mm,
We're constantly innovating to bring new products to market. There's always that opportunity. I mean, I think, hats off to everybody. You've picked a good degree course, because look at how science, in the current pandemic,
mm, gosh.
it's been crazy busy for us. It really
Mm,
has been busy, and people have seen, and VC funding has seen that actually
mm,
science is a worthwhile investment. The
yeah.
number of grants awarded for COVID research is phenomenal.
Mm,
There is that need. We will, there'll always be something appearing that we need to respond to. So scientific research is a good place to be.
it's a good place to be, absolutely. And just to finish off, thank you ever so much. Is as a tradition on our podcast to always ask us to our guests, if you could invite any inspirational figure that you admire, either passed away or currently alive, to an evening over dinner, who would it be and why? It's a very big question, so it's a
It
little
is.
bit it's a little bit
It's a really
tricky.
big question, and I thought about it. And when we had our little pre-interview meeting, I was like,
Mm,
oh yeah, I think that the Dalai Lama. Um,
yeah,
kind of changed. I did
you've changed from that.
thinking about it, and I changed it. So I think from that science perspective, um, there is there's a researcher, he's a professor, Tim Spector, who has
Okay.
just he's published a book called Spoon Fed,
Oh, okay.
and it is quite eye-opening. So as
Oh, all right.
he's a scientist saying, the things he thought about nutrition, We
Mm.
didn't quite get those right. He set up the Zoe app, which is the COVID symptom tracker. They were previously doing the Predict
Mm.
study. Fascinating, fascinating book. So I'm kind of partway through it. And I think if any of you are considering which way should we go in terms of the research, the microbiome, the gut health,
Oh yeah, yeah.
oh, it's a fascinating body of
It's
work. I think if I could go back and study again,
mm,
that's where I'd be.
it's
That's where I'd
funny
be
you
going.
mentioned that. It's funny you mentioned that because in a couple of weeks' time we'll have a very good doctor called Dr. Arone Romano, who's actually a very highly regarded nutritionist in Italy, and he's been working on it was a design called the paleo diet, originally taken
Yeah,
from the I think it was, oh, I can't remember the name. If it was called the Zone, which was a Barry Sears diet developed in America. Again, very much orientated around everyday problems coming from gut health and how, the influence of everyday nutrition is now really needed more than ever.
yeah.
And he'll be coming on the show to explain the benefits. In particular, he'll be talking about how important the gut health is towards the immune system, especially now with the pandemic. Like, there's a lot of good research saying about how a good gut health reflects on your immune system. And I mean, the susceptibility, and they call it the second brain. I mean, they call your intestine the second brain. So there's a lot of new research, and I think I think, tell me if I'm wrong, it's very, very difficult to study the gut microbiome because of the environment. You can't exactly, take biopsies and then go and study them under the microscope or do the test needed because of that, I guess,
And it
homeostasis, and
changes.
it
And it
changes.
changes. It
Mm,
changes according to, it can change quite quickly. Um, but it's fascinating. It really is, and that impact and that people's response is so different. So that we've lived lived through time when we believe, right, this is what you must do and you must follow these rules and this applies to everybody, and it doesn't.
mm,
It doesn't apply, and we have different responses to food. You and I will have a very different response to a piece of white bread,
mm,
and it depends on our genetic profiles. It depends on how our gut microbes are, and
yeah.
how well we've been in the previous 6 months.
Mm.
I'm really into it at the moment. It's
No,
fascinating. So
no,
I'd love to. I'm going to listen to your podcast in a couple of
yeah,
weeks then,
please do.
definitely.
And I think what's also interesting, I don't know if I think it's a very difficult area to study, but the epigenetics field is becoming very more immersive now in the scientific community. How, like, current day, whether it's diet, whether it's not previous mutations, but previous environmental factors which can affect the genetic um, I guess, structure or system. Has Thermo Fisher? I mean, is there been any involvement in the study of? It's very tricky to correlate an environmental factor to, okay, X factor from a lifestyle choice can influence Y genetic mutations. Is that?
It is, and it's not. It's sort of not. It sort of isn't an
Yeah.
area. I mean, obviously we have the next generation sequencing, so that
Mm,
ability to analyze and process data, and I think even more so that the data sets, the digital sciences, and how we
mm,
process the data points that we would need to capture in order to start to build that.
yeah.
But it's a rapidly changing field, and it's
I
quite
think it's still very
fascinating.
brand new. Yeah, it's still very brand new.
Yeah, exactly. But I would definitely recommend reading the book. It's
All right. So it was spoon fed by
spoon fed. It's Tim Spector.
Tim Spector. All right. So if any listeners want to buy that, you'll be helping out, and then maybe you
He has
have
an
the same
Instagram
opinion.
page. He has an Instagram page,
Okay,
and,
there we
and he
go.
he keeps it updated. Yeah.
Okay, that's all right then. Well, thank you ever so much, Julie, and thank you everyone for listening. Please tune in next time where we'll be interviewing Dr. Alexander Green, a neurosurgeon specialized in deep brain stimulation here at our very own John Radcliffe Oxford University Hospital, and he'll be talking about or his experiences in surgery. And thank you ever so much for listening. Thank you, Julie, for joining us, and catch you guys till next time. Bye
Thank you,
now.
Luca.
Thank you. Bye now.